There's a fascinating change right here in Graham's attitude.
Jack, this is Graham. Is Price still in latent prints?
Yeah, he's in charge of the single print index now. What do you got, Will?
Get him to Atlanta.
Atlanta PD swears they dusted everything, and their guy's pretty good.
He is good. He's not as good as Price.
I'll get him out of plane in the morning. What do you want him to do?
From a violent outburst, he contains all his aggression, holds onto the wall, and has a very flattened affect as he talks to Crawford.
Our people swear he wore surgeon's gloves the whole time. They dusted everything.
The idea behind that had to do with the second part of Graham's character, and that is that the closer Graham gets to the perpetrator of these heinous acts, the more intense is the imaginings Graham is experiencing. And prior to the beginning of the film, 3 years ago, the intensity of experiencing what Graham abhors caused Graham to have a mental breakdown. So which is to say that in order to get close to and impede and stop a killer, Graham needs to get close to serious mental disease. So Graham's skill is a two-edged sword. As he responds to necessity, he endangers himself. As he does what he wants to do, which is to stop killing, he's destroying. He's taking himself on a path that's very self-destructive. That is what I think is what's so brilliant about Thomas Harris's invention, and what fascinated me so much. It made this, to me, a totally unique detective story, and one that had some dynamics and complexities that I had never seen before, and in fact it was about something.
I don't think he's a drifter acting upon victims of opportunity.
And this scene, which is in the Atlanta Police Department, this scene was reworked and has been extended from the theatrical version.
Competently with little or no leakage.
Meaning, in appearance, he could be absolutely anyone.
That's right. Bodies being arranged into an audience, and the mirrors make me believe that there's a rich and intense fantasy life going on here.
The elevated experience is the fantasy. The act fuels the fantasy. To discover what he thinks he's doing in there, why he picked who he picked, did what he did, to understand his motive, you have to know his illusions, his dreams.
Which are?
I don't know.
What else do you have for us?
That's all I have.
All right. Buy some narcotics. You take the KY Cowboys and the leather bars. Marcus Whitman heads up at the funeral. The rest of you, your assignments are on the sheet. Let's go. Oh, well, one more thing. I've heard officers referring to this killer as the Tooth Fairy. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I don't want to hear that in public, and I don't want to see it in internal memoranda. That's it.
I know a burglar's gonna fence what he stole because his motive is cash money. I know his motive, so I go to work on fences. This guy, we don't even have motive. None of us have shit, and we know it.
It's in his dreams.
His motive?
Yeah. Commissioner was saying that you're the one who got Garrett Jacob Hobbs, and then Dr. Lector 3 years ago.
Lecter killed 9 people, didn't he?
9 that we know of. 2 didn't die.
What happened then?
One's on a respirator at a hospital in Baltimore, the other's in a private mental hospital in Denver.
What the psychologist say was wrong with Lecter?
Psychologists call him a psychopath.
So how abhorrent is the taking of life is to Graham, somebody who deals with the true horror of homicide, not the garden variety, kind of two-dimensional way it's portrayed many times on television or genre pictures, which is fine, but it's cartoon violence. Coming up against it in real close proximity, real intensity. The abhorrent nature of it is shocking for any people who've been around serious crime scenes. rendering of a human life into an inanimate piece of matter. A human life that had a past, that had a childhood, that has parents, that has children, that has brothers and sisters and friends, that suddenly ends arbitrarily because of indifferent motivations.
Maybe, if he's ever been printed and he's in my index. I want to work these up in my own darkroom. I'll fax the prints down to you this afternoon.
Thanks, Jimmy.
No comment.
We get lucky with that print we're in. If Jimmy can find him in the index. And
So as Graham involves himself in this hunt, and Graham is, after all, if you say, what's Graham's action? His action is to hunt. That's what he does throughout the whole movie. He starts to exhibit characteristics not of killers, but the psychological patterns, such as the one right here.
how's he doing, Will?
Meaning explosive violence.
Will.
It's there because Graham, in subtle ways, is beginning to inhabit the realm, the landscape of the dollar hives and the lectors, and Graham knows it. And that's why he says what he says right now.
That's Houdini you're thinking about.
To recover the mindset.
The Tooth Fairy's gonna go on until we get smart or we get lucky. He won't stop.
Why?
Because he's got a genuine taste for it.
You do know something about it.
Not enough. I think I'll go see Lecter tomorrow.
Why?
Recover the mindset.
Everything you just saw was shot in Atlanta. This house that Molly's in, the house that opened the picture, is a location that's actually in Captiva, Florida, and it's owned by the artist Robert Rauschenberg, who was around quite a bit of time when we were shooting in Florida.
Else I haven't done enough with you yet.
Were you going to be in Atlanta long? I mean,
This is another scene in which Graham is in the Atlanta hotel and he calls Molly. This is not in the theatrical version. I put it back here. The intent of the scene is to have Graham in touch with what he holds dear, what is human and real and emotional in his life, almost as if he's touching in a way, mentally touching in a way, something that's very appealing and very attractive, and not dissimilar to the Jacoby woman or the Leeds woman.
well, I don't know why I'm talking trivia.
So, like an actor uses anything in his life, in fact, any experience in his life is fair game for him to either recall to himself emotional or via sense memory of what it was to live through something really abhorrent, which may even involve, in a very personal, private way, the death of a parent, or to locate himself in that circumstances. For example, James Dean locating himself in the abuse he suffered at the hands of his real father to more fully play out his role in East of Eden. So too, Graham, almost as an actor, is manipulating his state of mind by putting himself in touch with Molly. So Graham's starting to exhibit extremes of behavior. He's exhibiting a cold containment in the Leeds house, the unexpected 90-degree turn, such as the violence that he visits upon Lowndes, the reporter from the tabloid. And when he is trying to contain himself, his voice has a certain flattened affect. That's almost a psychopathic kind of a attitude that would be characteristics of some of the people who have clinical disorders. This extraordinary Brian Cox playing Dr. Hannibal Lecter in his first appearance.
I got it, thank you.
There was an impulse during the shooting, even writing the screenplay during the shooting, to have more Lecter. And it's something I resisted because I felt that
No, of course you don't.
he was such a charismatic character that I wanted audience to almost not to quite get enough of him.
Somewhere. Second raters, the lot.
So I restricted him to these scenes.
Journal of Clinical Psychiatry.
Huh?
Very interesting.
The Graham Dr. Lecter prison scene is longer in this version than it is in the theatrical version.
Interesting term. So many experts on
Now, Lecter right here reveals that he, of course, knew from the get-go exactly what Will Graham's motivation was in coming to see him. That is to regain the scent.
I want you to help me, Dr. Lecter.
This set was built on a stage in Wilmington, North Carolina. But this is and outside the cell, the rest of the mental institution is in fact a location in Atlanta, Georgia, which we're going to see in a minute. And it's Richard Myers High Museum.
But you might be curious to see if you're smarter than the person I'm looking for.
Then by implication, you think you're smarter than me since you quote
Richard Myers is well known as the architect of the Getty Center in Los Angeles.
You got disadvantages.
What disadvantages?
You're insane.
You're very darn well.
Graham's told us he's here for one reason, and that's to recover the mindset. And that means that Graham will almost meditatively concentrate on the patterns, the rhythms, the sense of Lecter. That's why he puts himself in proximity to Lecter.
I don't think I'll persuade you at all. You'll either do it or you won't. Besides, we have Dr. Blue.
Lecter tortures Will because he knows that Will's weak point, what Will finds most abhorrent, the taking of life, is something that Will has to build within himself. And so the accusation,
You haven't threatened to take away my books yet.
is that the fact there's a killer inside Graham. So that's what Lecter says, smell yourself. It brings up issues like what are the boundaries? And what happens if Graham kills? Is Graham the walking wounded with homicidal psychotic tendencies himself, or is that something that Graham could slip over into? Could he transcend the borders and find himself in that state of mind? Brian Cox was a British stage actor, and a very good friend of mine, the actor Brian Dennehy, very much wanted to play Hannibal Lecter. And we were in New York, and Brian said to me, I'm going to prove to you how good a friend of yours I am. I'm going to tell you as much as I want to play Hannibal Lecter. There's actually somebody better for it, and he's a British actor you've never heard of named Brian Cox, who is doing a play in New York called Rat in the Skull. And I went to see Brian, and I thought he was fabulous, and we met, and I cast him for it. The complexity, the intelligence of Hannibal Lecter, his wit, how wry he is that's W-R-Y, is something I thought Cox brought to this, and it was, his work was, I believe, stunningly threatening and malevolent.
It would be better to have privacy for this sort of thing.
Lecter is almost a Victorian or an Edwardian kind of a character. He's not purely evil. He's shocking and he's wicked, and it's to be honest, I don't really know why. I just it's one of those things where you know it when you see it, and it was apparent from the pages of the Red Dragon novel that Lecter was a major invention. I think what is with Lecter in part is that in the form of a villain, the villain gives him a license to do whatever he chooses to do. So it's kind of a two-level character. In the first layer, first level, he's a villain and he commits heinous acts. But in the second level, because he's the villain, commits these heinous acts, that gives him the license to do the second function that he performs. And that second function is he kind of does things we'd like to do. In other words, he's dangerous,